I remember the exact moment the race started for me. I was 24, sitting at my desk, probably on my third coffee before 10 a.m., scrolling through social media on a break I hadn't earned yet. And there it was, the Forbes 30 Under 30 list. A guy I knew from high school, someone I used to trade comics with, was on it. His face was right there, professionally photographed, next to a blurb about his disruptive tech startup. My first thought wasn't good for him. It was a cold, quiet panic. A voice in my head started an immediate, brutal audit of my own life. While he was disrupting industries, I hadn't even managed to schedule a dentist appointment. The gap between his life and mine suddenly felt like a canyon. So I did what any rational, panicked 24-year-old would do. I opened a spreadsheet. I titled it Life Overhaul. I mapped out goals, created systems, and designed a morning routine so rigid it could have run a small country. The mission was simple: close the gap, catch up, win the race. For the next 15 years, that spreadsheet was my Bible. What's strange looking back is that no one ever told me I was in a race. I just assumed I was losing it.
That feeling, that cold, quiet panic when, external metrics suddenly dictate your personal worth. That's become such a defining anxiety for so many of us, hasn't it? It's that sudden, really profound sense that you are failing at some invisible high-stakes competition. We all know that feeling, that gap between where we are and where we think society is telling us we should be. So today we're doing a really critical deep dive into the sources that kind of dissect this anxiety. I want to explore the psychological cost of constantly chasing external validation. What happens when all that hard work just doesn't deliver sustained happiness? We're going to look into the surprising ways traditional corporate structures can actually, punish high performers. And maybe most importantly, we'll see how this emerging generation, Gen Z, is forcing us all to completely rethink the very definition of professional success, moving away from just acquiring things to, living with intention. We really need to unpack this reality of running a race that fundamentally no one ever actually signed us up for.
Absolutely. And it's essential we start with the psychological root of that panic you just described so well, because it perfectly illustrates what our research identifies as the achievement paradox. Now, the achievement paradox, it's not just some catchy phrase, right? It's a deeply researched psychological phenomenon. It basically describes this cycle where the relentless pursuit of external measurable success, promotions, bigger salaries, public awards, all that stuff, it leads directly to this internal persistent emptiness. You might chase a goal for years, maybe sacrifice relationships, your health. You finally get there, you reach that peak, and the payoff is, one source literally described it as just silence. The accomplishment just doesn't land internally.
And this isn't just about feeling a bit unfulfilled. It connects directly to things like hedonic adaptation, doesn't it?
Yeah.
If the goal is purely external, the satisfaction has to be fleeting.
Oh, absolutely. The achievement paradox is basically fueled by what psychologists call the hedonic treadmill. So when you achieve an external goal, a big bonus, maybe a fancy title, you get this temporary spike of positive emotion and, dopamine kicks in. But your psychological set point, it adjusts incredibly quickly. So the joy of that new corner office or the bigger salary, it's really short-lived. Maybe a few weeks, and then the goalpost immediately shifts. It's like, okay, if I achieve that, now I must achieve the next thing. You're forced right back onto that treadmill, chasing the next metric. You never actually allow yourself to savor the achievement you just made because your whole sense of worth is tied to moving forward, not to actually arriving.
Right, the arrival is almost irrelevant. And we see the crushing weight of this paradox so clearly in the stories of these high achievers who just hit a wall. Let's talk about Kenji, that 28-year-old corporate analyst in Tokyo. He was the absolute definition of the corporate warrior.
Yeah, Kenji's life was this endless loop, really defined by efficiency and self-denial. We're talking 5:30 a.m. starts, the hum of the office late into the night, often catching the very last train home. And apparently the only thing visible then was his own reflection staring back from the dark window. His routine wasn't really about true productivity. It felt more like performative presence, dedicated entirely to building that resume. His internal worth was dictated solely by his quarterly performance review.
And his moment of clarity, his breaking point, it was so poignant because it was so ordinary. Waiting for that last train, just scrolling through old photos on his phone, he saw an image from a university trip, a younger version of himself looking genuinely relaxed, laughing, holding some cheap film camera. The contrast apparently was devastating. The face staring back from the phone was alive, vital. The face staring back from the train window, just exhausted and completely detached.
And that realization triggered what the sources we looked at called his quiet rebellion. It wasn't some dramatic, I quit scene, not at all. It was a commitment to small, almost sacred boundaries. He set this firm deadline, leaving the office precisely at 7 p.m., no exceptions. And he reclaimed that time, not for networking events or more career stuff, but for basic human maintenance. Things like cooking a proper meal, just walking in a park, picking up photography again. And crucially, purely for pleasure, with absolutely no goal of monetizing it or having a gallery show, the whole focus shifted from proving his worth to simply living a life that felt, well, sustainable.
Wow. And then there's the other side of that coin, maybe. Eleanor, the U.S. marketing director, she hit every single marker of what we call textbook success by the time she was 35. Multi-million-dollar campaigns, corner office, stunning apartment, in the whole package.
Eleanor's story really highlights how external validation just completely fails to register if there's no intrinsic motivation behind it. So she had just closed the most complex, high-value deal her entire career. Huge win. Her company gave her this heavy, ornate crystal trophy, a very tangible symbol of her success. She walked into her beautiful, minimalist apartment, placed this heavy trophy on the mantle, and the sources say she felt nothing, an absolute hollow void, just emptiness. She realized the feeling of satisfaction, the thrill, it was tied entirely to the stress and the chase, not the actual win. The achievement itself was just a silent, heavy object sitting there.
That's chilling. So how do you even begin to recover from a victory that feels that hollow? Her path was almost radical in its simplicity, wasn't it?
It really was. She started volunteering at a local community garden. Simple as that. She focused on the tangible, slow act of nurturing a plant, from a tiny seed right through to harvest. She wasn't chasing a promotion anymore. She was chasing growth that felt real, immediate, right in front of her. And that intrinsic purpose, that feeling of making a genuine contribution, witnessing simple life unfold, it gave her a sense of meaning that the massive corporate contract just never could replicate.
It feels like that's the crux of the paradox, that relentless pursuit. It leads to this profound emotional and physical drain. Like you said, a life full of motion but completely lacking meaning.
Exactly. And it manifests as these severe internal symptoms. Little wins, they don't even register as exciting anymore because they just raise the bar for the next impossible challenge. Rest starts to feel like active failure, like you're losing your competitive edge if you stop. And maybe the most insidious part is that stillness itself causes anxiety because the core belief drilled into you is if you are not actively achieving, you are fundamentally not okay.
Okay, so the internal anxiety is incredibly real, and these stories, they confirm the psychological cost is just devastating. But what we need to dig into next is the external system, the one that doesn't just allow this, but actively enforces it. We're moving from the internal paradox to the mechanism that perpetuates it. Hustle culture.
Precisely. Hustle culture. It's that pervasive societal mindset, you see it everywhere, that argues success is directly proportional to suffering. It insists that if you aren't working impossibly long hours every single day focused on your career, then by definition, you're not trying hard enough. And therefore, you don't deserve success. It has effectively turned busy into a moral and professional badge of honor. Being busy is seen as virtuous.
Yeah, it's more than just valuing hard work. It's the toxic glorification of working around the clock, right? Prioritizing professional metrics above absolutely every other aspect of life, health, relationships, everything. And you see this mindset taken to such ludicrous extremes, often championed by these self-appointed gurus.
Oh, the sources we looked at contain some truly shocking quotes from proponents of this extreme view. Statements suggesting just utter and total self-sacrifice is necessary. For example, one quote was, "You may lose your wife. You may lose your dog. Your mother may hate you. None of those things matter. What matters is that you achieve success and become free." I mean, think about that narrative. It suggests you have to completely obliterate your personal life, sacrifice basic human connections, because your competitor, presumably, is willing to do that. It positions working, 25 hours a day, 8 days a week as the only path forward.
The sheer absurdity of that statement is just breathtaking. And frankly, it's incredibly damaging, because what the anti-hustle advocates are stressing is the complete opposite. Busy isn't better. In fact, for most complex, creative, or strategic roles, constant busyness actively sabotages high-level work.
It absolutely becomes counterproductive. It leads to chronic decision fatigue. It reduces your cognitive capacity. It stifles any real creativity. People start confusing being active with being effective. Often, that hyper-busy schedule is just a sophisticated form of professional procrastination. People stay buried in easy, familiar tasks to avoid tackling the truly difficult, high-value strategic challenges that actually move the needle.
Yeah, this toxic system, this relentless pressure, it leads directly to a systemic failure in how workplaces reward people, something employees have started calling performance punishment. This is where that internal anxiety, the achievement paradox, really crashes into managerial reality.
Performance punishment. It's a concept really born from this collective frustration that doing excellent work isn't rewarded with advancement or maybe reduced responsibility, but with the exact opposite. Just more work and often higher, sometimes completely unreasonable expectations. The core argument is pretty simple. Employees who consistently go above and beyond, the ones who volunteer for extra projects, never take sick days, work unpaid overtime, they become too valuable in their current functional role to risk promoting them out of it.
That managerial logic is just devastating, isn't it? It relies entirely on short-term risk aversion. A manager doesn't want to gamble on putting a high-performing employee into a new, perhaps unproven role when that employee is already perfectly solving a critical problem right where they are. The perceived cost of replacing and training someone new to that same high level of performance is seen as higher than the moral cost of just keeping the high performer stuck.
We saw this illustrated perfectly in that anecdote about the top delivery driver. When he asked for a promotion, maybe into logistics or management, his manager told him straight up, "You're too good at delivering. I couldn't afford to lose you at that position." Just think about the message that sends. Your own excellence actively prevents your advancement. So the driver, seeing his career path basically capped by his own competence, quit immediately, found something else.
It brings to mind that really blunt but devastating metaphor. If you are the world's greatest ditch digger, they won't make you president of the ditch digging corporation. They're just going to get you a bigger shovel. You just get more of the same hard work, forcing you to stay down in the pit. Well, maybe those who are better at, managing upwards or perhaps strategically underperforming are the ones who actually ascend.
And the collective impact of this is just corrosive for everyone. The overworked, hyper-competitive employee who regularly puts in unpaid overtime, they unknowingly set this impossible baseline. Their extreme effort gets normalized, which then makes it exponentially harder for the rest of the team to advocate for basic things like work-life boundaries, or to say no to extra duties without looking bad, or even just take a legitimate sick day without feeling like they're slacking off. It poisons the well for the entire team.
And look, this isn't just us moralizing about fairness. It's a recognized medical and economic reality. We have to ground this critique in actual data. The World Health Organization officially recognizes burnout as an occupational phenomenon for a very good reason.
The data is undeniable. Chronic, long working hours, which are really the cornerstone of hustle culture, significantly increase the risk of serious health problems. We're talking cardiovascular disease, hypertension, major mental health crises like depression and anxiety. And furthermore, the economic argument for those endless hours just collapses under scrutiny. Beyond a certain point, simply adding more hours does not yield increased productivity. Instead, you see a sharp decline in job satisfaction, in employee engagement, and ultimately in the quality of the work produced. So, the old rules. They aren't just unfair, they are physically, psychologically, and even economically unsustainable. So if this established system driven by external pressure, by hustle culture, by performance punishment, if it's fundamentally broken and unsustainable, then the only real option left is a paradigm shift. And this brings us neatly to the generational change we mentioned, specifically the growing influence of Generation Z, those born roughly between 1997 and 2012. They are literally rewriting the contract between employee and employer as we speak.
And we should stress, this isn't some small niche group we're talking about. They are rapidly becoming the dominant force in the professional world. They've already surpassed baby boomers in the U.S. workforce. And projections suggest that by 2025, which is right around the corner, they'll make up something like 27% of the entire global workforce.
Yeah.
They're not asking for minor tweaks. They're demanding a systemic renovation based on a really distinct values-first mindset.
That's right. Their priorities represent a fundamental divergence from previous generations, where, say, Gen X and baby boomers often prioritize stability, job security, and maybe the highest possible salary above all else. Gen Z prioritizes things like personal development, flexibility, authenticity, and, importantly, technological fluency. They're looking for meaningful impact and ethical alignment far more than just pure wealth acquisition.
And this isn't just, anecdotal feeling. It's empirically verifiable. We looked at a really key study that investigated the relationship between three specific factors: purpose-driven culture, work-life integration, and digital competency, and how they impacted Gen Z employees' intention to actually stay with the company. The findings are quite illuminating.
They really are. The study used multiple linear regression, which is a standard statistical tool. And the model showed that these three factors, when combined, explained 45.4% of the variance in a Gen Z employee's intention to stay. Now, for anyone not steeped in social science statistics, explaining nearly half 45.4% of the reason why someone chooses to stay or leave. That's considered a moderate to strong fit. It's significant. It means that almost half of the decision-making process for Gen Z retention can be attributed to these three specific environmental factors, often outweighing traditional incentives like salary alone.
And the hierarchy within those three factors is crucial too. Let's break down the strongest predictor first.
Okay, the strongest predictor, by a noticeable margin, was purpose-driven culture. It registered a beta value of 0.326 in the model. Now, to put that beta value into practical terms for you listening, for every 1 unit increase in how much an employee perceives their company as having a purpose-driven culture, their intention to remain at that company increases by 0.326 units, assuming all other factors are held constant. That magnitude, statistically, is immense in this context. Gen Z actively seeks organizations that emphasize things like social impact, sustainability, ethical practices. They want their work to mean something beyond just profit.
And the philosophical break from the past year is really stark, isn't it? The research confirms that something like 86% of Gen Zers view having a sense of purpose as absolutely key to their job satisfaction. And even more striking is the trade-off they're willing to make. 70% of Gen Z prioritize working for what they deem ethical organizations, even if it means accepting a lower salary.
Right, and this stands in really direct contrast to older cohorts, particularly Gen X, where that figure drops significantly, down to around 47%. So for Gen Z, this isn't just a preference, it's often a non-negotiable value. If the work feels meaningless, or if the organization's actions clearly conflict with its stated values, Gen Z will walk, even away from bigger paychecks, because the emotional cost, the cognitive dissonance of working against their core values is just too high for them to bear.
Okay, moving to the second strongest predictor from that study, digital competency, which had a beta of 0.301. Why is having good tech, good digital tools such a driver of loyalty and retention for this group?
Well, as true digital natives, Gen Z has a baseline expectation for advanced, intuitive technology. This isn't just about having the newest, shiniest laptop, right? It's about seamless workflow, effective real-time communication tools, and crucially, opportunities for continuous digital upskilling. They want to learn and grow digitally. So when a company invests in modern infrastructure, it signals that the organization is forward-thinking, innovative, and values efficiency. Conversely, if a company is stuck using clunky, outdated systems, it signals institutional stagnation and inefficiency. That's a major turnoff for a generation that really values speed and autonomy. Basically, bad tech makes their work harder and more frustrating than it needs to be.
Makes sense. And the third significant predictor with a beta of 0.289 was work-life integration. Now, this is a term we hear thrown around a lot, but it's critical we distinguish it from the traditional work-life balance that maybe older generations sought.
Yes, that distinction is absolutely vital. Balance often implied the strict compartmentalization. Work stays at work, home stays at home, keep them separate. Integration, which has been enabled by technology and also shaped by their experiences with remote schooling and working during formative years, is much more about blending the two spheres. Gen Z wants autonomy over when and where they work. They tend to resist rigid 9-to-5 schedules, preferring flexibility, hybrid or remote options, and they place a high value on strong mental wellness support structures being available and encouraged. They see work as just one component of a whole life, not some separate competing entity that needs to be walled off.
We see this divergence playing out so clearly in individual choices that just fly in the face of the old traditional achievement standards. Let's revisit that story of Sophia, the brilliant young coder in Lisbon.
Right, Sophia. She received what many people, certainly her parents' generation, would consider the ultimate prize, a coveted, high-prestige job offer from a massive global tech giant. Came with a staggering 6-figure salary. Her parents, who grew up valuing financial stability above pretty much everything else, saw this as the absolute pinnacle, the culmination of her potential, the golden ticket.
But Sophia turned it down flat. She consciously chose to forego all that financial security and the undeniable prestige that came with that job offer.
She did. Instead, she joined a small, low-pay cooperative that she actually started with 2 friends. And their entire focus was on building an app specifically designed to help elderly residents in Lisbon connect with local community volunteers for things like errands, companionship, basic support.
Her parents, understandably from their perspective, probably viewed it as reckless, maybe even a betrayal of the investment they'd made in her education. But for Sophia, this was her definition of success. She gained complete autonomy over her time, she had immediate and tangible connection to her local community, and she was doing work that felt inherently meaningful to her. She fundamentally chose purpose and community connection over maximizing wealth and status. It just shows how, for this generation, the entire value equation seems to have flipped. Okay, so now that we understand the data driving this shift and the core values behind it, let's look a bit closer at the practical implications of these three factors: authentic purpose, integration, and digital competency. How do they actually work together in a modern organization?
Well, it's really the synergistic effect of these pillars working together that drives long-term commitment and retention. Let's start with pillar 1, authentic purpose. In today's cynical world, how do our sources define authentic? Because it's clearly not enough to just, slap a feel-good mission statement on the company website.
No, absolutely not. The sources really stress that authenticity has to be proven through concrete actions. Purpose needs to be visibly integrated into every single aspect of the organization. That means from leadership behavior and investment decisions right down to HR policies and just daily operational choices. If Gen Z employees perceive hypocrisy, a gap between the stated values and the actual ethical practices of the company, say regarding environmental impact or social justice issues, they will disengage almost immediately.
Yes.
And that leads directly to higher turnover.
Exactly. And this is why purpose functions as what some researchers call a psychological anchor. During periods of market volatility or maybe organizational change or even just internal.
Okay, moving to pillar 2, integration versus compartmentalization. Since flexibility is clearly becoming a strategic imperative, not just a casual perk anymore, how do organizations manage the very real risk of the always-on phenomenon? Because unchecked integration could easily slide right back into toxic hustle culture, just with a different label.
That is the crucial caveat, you're right. True, healthy work-life integration demands that organizations set explicit policies that promote autonomy while also actively protecting periods of required disconnection and self-care. This could mean enforcing asynchronous communication rules like not expecting instant replies after standard work hours. It means offering robust mental health and wellness support programs that are not just available but actively promoted and utilized, even by leadership. Flexibility has to mean genuinely controlling your own time, not just being constantly tethered to work through an invisible digital leash 24/7.
Right, the protection aspect is key. And finally, pillar 3, digital empowerment. This isn't just a cost of doing business anymore. It's emerging as a core retention strategy in itself. Investing in advanced tools, whether that's AI assistance for certain tasks, better cloud infrastructure, advanced collaboration platforms. It seems Gen Z interprets this as the company being committed to their efficiency and supporting their professional growth.
Absolutely. The ability to work efficiently and autonomously is deeply empowering for anyone, but especially this generation. If the tools you provide actually reduce friction and enable faster, higher quality work, you are actively reinforcing loyalty. And the synergy comes in here too. Good digital tools directly facilitate those flexible, integrated work schedules we just talked about. And they can also enable participation in purpose-driven initiatives, for example, using digital platforms to coordinate company-wide sustainability efforts or facilitate ethical supply chain tracking.
So it's this complete package. The meaning from purpose, the control from integration, and the efficiency from digital tools that really drives commitment.
Yeah.
Trying isolated efforts, like just throwing more money at the problem by raising salaries, is likely far less effective than an integrated strategy that addresses all three of these core needs.
Okay, so we started this deep dive with that listener, maybe you, feeling that cold panic, the anxiety of constantly checking that imaginary spreadsheet to see if you were catching up in some race. The fundamental question becomes, how does the individual, maybe feeling caught in the undertow of hustle culture and the achievement paradox, actually implement this shift toward more intentional living?
It's a great question. And the path forward, according to many who've successfully broken free from that relentless grind, is often surprisingly counterintuitive. The solution isn't usually addition. It's not about adding a new, more virtuous goal to the list. Often the answer is subtraction. Subtraction.
Yeah.
Meaning stepping away from that ingrained belief that every single spare moment, every skill you have, every hobby you enjoy must somehow be monetized, optimized, or logged as another achievement on the list.
Precisely that. The real shift, as some describe it, is often found in implementing these small, almost sacred acts of self-reclamation. It might start with simply turning off non-essential notifications on your phone, or maybe taking long walks specifically without a podcast playing or a planned destination in mind, or consciously dedicating a few hours each week to an activity purely for pleasure, with absolutely zero intention of showcasing it online or figuring out how to turn it into a side hustle, just doing it because you enjoy it.
And the most powerful realization that often follows these small acts of subtraction is that nothing actually fell apart. The world kept spinning, the corporation didn't collapse,
Yeah.
your career didn't implode just because you stepped back slightly or enforced a boundary. That realization starts to dismantle the core anxiety, the fear that you must be in constant motion just to stay afloat.
Exactly. The goal shifts entirely at that point. It moves away from trying to impress those external markers, the Forbes list, the perfect LinkedIn profile, whatever it is, and moves towards simply being honest with yourself about your limits, your true interests, and your fundamental needs as a human being. The new definition of success becomes entirely relational to your internal state, your well-being, not your external status or rank.
So success stops being about the endless stacking up of achievements and transforms into something simpler, but maybe more profound. The goal of building a life you do not constantly feel the need to escape from, the metrics just change completely.
The new metrics become intrinsic. Things like, do you have enough money to live securely and meet your needs rather than chasing endless abstract wealth? Is the work you do feel real and meaningful to you rather than being purely performative for others? Are your relationships safe, supportive, and nourishing rather than just impressive or strategically maintained for appearances? And maybe most importantly, do you feel like you have control over your own time and autonomy? This is the quiet but radical challenge this generation is posing to the old system.
So the key lesson, maybe, for anyone still feeling like they're battling that invisible race, is rejecting the primary lie that the achievement culture sells us. The lie that success means never, ever slowing down. You do not have to earn the right to rest. Your intrinsic worth as a person is simply not measured by what you produce or how ceaselessly busy you manage to appear to everyone else. We started this deep dive in that moment of cold, quiet panic, didn't we? Staring at some external list of accomplishments and measuring our personal worth against it. And what we found, looking at the research and the stories, is that the metrics often sold to us, the relentless grind, the expectation of nonstop peak performance, are fundamentally flawed. They often lead only to the psychological emptiness of the achievement paradox and the systemic disappointment of performance punishment. We learned that the next generation, Gen Z, is simply not accepting these broken rules anymore. They're demanding a profound shift, prioritizing meaning, autonomy, and modern digital infrastructure, often over traditional security or just a high salary alone. They're demonstrating that a different, more sustainable model of success isn't just possible, it's already becoming the new professional standard. That moment of clarity you might be seeking, whether it comes from staring at your own tired reflection in a window like Kenji or feeling the hollow weight of some crystal trophy like Eleanor, that moment isn't a breakdown. It's actually a necessary and maybe profound moment of reintroduction. A reintroduction to the authentic self that was patiently waiting all along, buried beneath the layers of expectation and performance we pile on. Perhaps the greatest deception of the entire achievement race is how it convinces you that if you just work hard enough, eventually you will earn the right to slow down. But in reality, life isn't some startup company to be scaled infinitely. It's a human experience to be lived. And your capacity for joy, for meaning, for contentment, it's maximized only when you decide to fully, honestly, and immediately start living it on your own terms.